For those of you who are familiar with the 350Z, you'll know that right here in my engine bay there should be a power steering pump, and there is not one. And today I'm going to go over 1, why I did it, 2, the benefits of removing your power steering, and 3, how to remove your power steering. So first we're going to talk about why I removed my power steering, and then why I kept my power steering removed. So my power steering rack got damaged early on while I was working on another part of a car and developed a pretty serious leak, one that I couldn't really fix. The only option was to buy another rack and swap it in. So I decided, instead of just go ahead and jumping to that, I would try without my power steering first, because if I depowered this rack, decided I hated it, I was going to have to buy another rack anyway, so I might as well try it first. So we'll talk about depowering it later, but it's actually a super easy process. All you have to do is take the rack out of a car, disassemble it, do a few things, throw it back in, and you're ready to go. The car has run like this with no power steering since 2013, so it's been a solid 7 years. It's done daily driving, it's done track days. I would say it's probably done 30,000 miles with no power steering, and it's also done 20 track days. I've never done a track day with power steering on this car. It has always been a car without power steering, and it has worked extremely well. But we'll go through that a little more later. Right now I want to talk about the advantages of not having power steering. So first and foremost, it's very simple, and it's mostly for the show car guys. But number one is it clears up room in your engine bay. So I don't have a reservoir in here. I don't have the pump. I don't have the extra pulley. It just makes it easier for me to work in this section of the car. Doing a header swap on this car now with all of these accessories out of the way would definitely make the job a lot easier. So that's a huge benefit for me working at the track, is I have a lot more room to move things around, to work on the car and fix things, instead of having to fight around things that I don't need anymore. Number two, the car is going to make a little bit more power. So it's not taking a ton of power to run your power steering pump, but it is running power off of your accessories, which is ultimately robbing power from the rear wheels. It's also going to allow your car to rev up a little bit faster, because it's just less inertia that the engine has to overcome. So you will get a slight boost. Don't expect any huge numbers, but removing your power steering is just one less thing that your engine's doing, so you can focus on pushing the car forward. Number three, you're saving a decent amount of weight by doing this. You're removing a lot of power steering fluid, you're removing the reservoir, you're removing the pump, you're removing the ridiculously heavy bracket that it's attached to, you're going to have a shorter belt on the accessories. It's a lot of little things that all add up to a pretty decent weight savings of anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds. And while that may not sound like a lot, my philosophy for this is always lose as much weight as I can in all these little places, and it adds up to a great difference later. And you're removing it in the very front corner of the car, so it's a lot of weight that's far out front that you're removing, so it's a great place to lose weight if you're going to lose it. Another factor that's often overlooked is reliability. So with one less thing to worry about on the engine, that's one less thing to go wrong. So a lot of people have issues with their power steering pumps overheating, so you're going to have to add a larger cooler, you're going to have power steering lines that could leak, you're going to have a pump that can fail. You have all of these other things and fittings and places that you can have a problem on track that I no longer have to worry about. It's just a simpler system that has less opportunities to ruin my track day. Another part of this that's really small, but it was one advantage that I could just throw in that column, is I did actually get to sell the parts for a little bit of money. So I think I made $75 by selling all of the components, which isn't a whole lot of money, but every little bit counts. So all of the parts that I sold off this car are the reason that I now have 2 cars, because I was selling a bunch of parts on eBay, and eventually that allowed me to buy my E39. So every little bit helps is my philosophy for pretty much this whole car. And then the last thing, and the big reason that I have not put my power steering back on, is steering feel. My feel through that steering wheel is incredible. It is so much better than it was before. It's so much better than any other car that I have driven. It is such a direct connection between what my hands do and what the wheels on the ground do. You can feel every minute vibration. Anything that goes on at the wheels makes it to your fingertips. So it really is a big bonus in how I drive. If you watch any of my track videos, you'll notice that my steering inputs are very smooth. So while a lot of drivers are doing a lot of choppy inputs and really trying to hang themselves on a ragged edge this way, I slowly approach it. I can feel where the limit is, and then I can stay right there and then unwind the wheel with no drama. Because the car has no power steering, I can't sit there and saw at the wheel. I'm forced to be smooth, and smooth is fast. So it's really helped my track driving. I think it's made me a much better driver by causing me to slow down, making sure that my inputs are smooth and deliberate and well thought out so that my car stays pointed where I want it to. Now, really the only drawback is the added steering weight in slower situations. Once you're up to speed, once you're over 10 miles an hour, you do not notice at all, or at least I don't anymore. I mean, it would be a little bit of a surprise to someone to get in my car and just try to go drive it. But once you get used to it, I don't notice it anymore. I don't miss the power steering. And you just have to kind of slightly rework how you drive at low speeds. You have to plan out, that's the parking spot I want the car to end up in. So I'm going to really start to steer now to get myself into that spot. I have parallel parked this car. It's not impossible, it's just annoying. So if it's really worth it to you and it's really something you want to do, it can be done. I daily drove this car with no power steering for 3 years and it was fine. I didn't love it. It caused a couple of annoyances from time to time, but I did it and it worked. I wouldn't recommend it for a daily driven car unless it's something you really wanted to do for the reasons I listed out before. If it's a dual purpose car and you're really trying to get every last little bit out of it. But if it's a track only vehicle, my car weighs 500 pounds less than a stock car, so it's less weight to turn, so it's a little bit easier for me now than it was when the car was fully stock. So for a track vehicle, I would recommend trying it. You can easily loop the power steering lines together so that you can kind of try out the feel without doing anything irreversible. Now, I wouldn't recommend looping the lines as your permanent solution, but it's something that you could try to just see if you like it before doing something that is irreversible to your power steering rack. Now, I can't show you how I depowered my rack. It's already been done, and I don't want to pull my rack all the way out just to explain it, but luckily, there is a great DIY that I will list down in the description. I think it was on one of the Nissan forums, but what the guy did was he fully disassembled his rack. It was for a show Altima, and he disassembled it, showed me exactly what to do and where to do it, and I was able to depower my system following his exact descriptions. The Altima rack is slightly different than a 350Z rack, but it is almost exactly the same. I was easily able to do it when I was very new to working on cars. The basic concept is, inside your power steering rack there is a tube, and on that tube there is a disc that separates the fluid on either side. So as you want to turn to one side, the fluid presses on that disc and moves the shaft back and forth. Well, if you get rid of that disc, it's just an open cavity in there. So what you're going to have to do is take your power steering rack out. There's a very large collar on either side, but you're going to back out and you can slide the whole rack out once you remove the pinion out of the driver's side. You'll see that sticking out. That's what directly connects to your steering column. Once you have the pinion out and that nut out of the way, you can slide everything out. You'll see that disc. He's got a great picture of it. You just have to simply cut it on one side and you can just pop it right off. It comes off pretty easily. You'll put the power steering rack back together. You can button everything up. You can get fittings to block it off. You can weld it up, whatever you want to do to block off the holes, and just slather everything in a grease to make sure that it's lubricated because it won't have the fluid in it anymore. Put it back together and throw it in your car. That's all there is to it. You don't have to do anything to the steering wheel, anything to the steering column. Inner and outer tie rod ends are exactly the same. The only thing you're doing is getting rid of that disc, the fluid, and then removing all of the lines. So removing all the lines is pretty easy. Just snake them out of the way, remove the pump, and then figure out what pulleys you have left and find the right size belt for that. Wrap a string around it, figure out the length that you need, and then you can look up belts by length and figure out what's going to work for you. Now, one thing that I was not warned about, and I almost ruined my steering rack by doing this, is the collars on either end. Nissan has hammered down a little mark into them that you're going to have to pry back out before you can back the nut out, because they want to make sure the rack stays together and never comes apart while you're driving. So you'll see the little dimple on either side. You'll have to either drill it out or pry it back up to be able to remove the collar. But once you do that, everything else works perfectly. And like I said, I've been driving the car like this since 2013. It's been great. It really, I think, has made me a better driver. There are a bunch of other cars out there that people will switch from a power steering rack to a depowered manual rack, or to a manual rack that was a factory option. So the Mustang guys are big into that. The Miata guys are big into that. And I really think it's just a better option for a track vehicle. Of course, if you guys have any questions or comments and you want to pick my brain about this, feel free to drop those down below. But hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.